Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson today. We're listening to Killer Cases. This is the farmer's wife.
Seed of evil. It's a case of murder on the farm. She is gone because someone shot her. Yes, you did, Jason.
He told me that if I didn't get on the bus, that he was going to make sure I was under the bus.
I asked why he didn't farm together with his dad, and his response was, I can't because my mom is a bitch.
There's only two people in this world who know what happened on June 19th, 2015. And one of them is dead, and the other one's sitting behind me.
The killer is still out there that shot her.
This is what he's going to tell you. Just like if you get out of that situation.
Can I grab the gun?
Not knowing the first place to put a body.
No, sir. The only thing they could do was kill him.
You want to say anything? We, the jury, and you find the defendant. Where is your emergency?
Yeah. I need an ambulance, man.
Okay, to what address?
132 Perry Street.
It was the Iowa farm home of Shirley and Bill Carter, their son Jason, describing a horrible scene.
My mom was laying here on the floor. Blood where she's dead. I don't know what happened.
Jason's father, Bill Carter, was next to arrive.
And I went right in the kitchen, and there she lay. And I said, I'm so sorry, Mama.
Shirley Carter's murder in her remote western Iowa farmhouse devastated and ultimately would destroy her family.
It's really like the most horrific nightmare you could ever imagine, to lose someone that you love so dearly, and then your family to be just shredded, ripped apart.
She'll be ashamed of her family. It's fallen apart.
At the age of 67, Shirley Carter had raised 3 children, always busy with her grandchildren, and still active on the farm with her own John Deere tractor to help in the family's 900 acres of soybean and corn.
She was a hard worker, that's for sure, and she loved her grandkids, and, I miss her.
Her husband of 52 years, Bill, actually talked a suicide.
Well, I thought I'd lost everything. Everything. I never had any trouble in my life. Even when we had to get married young, we never had trouble. And then for something like this to happen in our old age, it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense.
And as Bill Carter replayed in his mind the image of his wife's body that terrible morning in the kitchen, he began to wonder.
Because she was laying face up, and her hands were like this across her chest, and her eyes were open. And I thought, you don't die that way. And I said to Jason, I said it had to be somebody that loved her.
And it was his youngest son, Jason, who found the body and came under suspicion almost immediately, as the lead detective, Mark Ludwig, would later testify.
He was immediately on my radar even before I arrived on the scene.
Ludwig had listened to Jason's 911 call as he drove to the scene, and something did not sound right to him.
And right away that fell to me, in my mind, of his words that he used, how he described the scene, and his emotions.
How would Jason know she had been there for 2 hours?
He's attempting to introduce that she had been dead for 2 hours when he had a solid alibi.
2 hours earlier, Jason Carter was seen on video at a grain elevator, but Agent Ludwig remained suspicious.
My experience tells me that if a person goes into great detail of the crime scene, that is that normal? Don't do that. You just find your mother dead on the floor, unless they're trying to be deceitful.
Adding to the questions about Jason was a secret he had kept from police and his wife, a torrid extramarital affair. A secret revealed when police discovered a phone he had hidden under the hood of his truck in the fuse box. It was a phone he had been using to send text to the local woman with whom he was having the affair.
Since I didn't bring that to their attention right out of the gate, I guess they just assumed that I was nothing but a liar. And a liar and a cheat. And for that reason, the lead investigator just zeroed in right on me and never lost focus.
Within 3 days of the murder, both Jason Carter and his wife Shelley were in the back of a patrol car, being brought into the local sheriff's office for questioning.
They took me into a small courtroom there at the sheriff's office. And, you know, I will never forget that. You know, and they told me about Jason having an affair. And of course it was, you know, just like, to be honest, you know, just so disappointing. And more than anything, just heartbreaking.
Down the hall in the sheriff's office, Jason Carter was in the middle of what would be an almost 11-hour interrogation.
So you have an idea that they really did. Okay.
He was asked and agreed to take a lie detector test.
Okay, move back. Try to relax. So we'll begin the test. I'll have your feet flat on the floor. I'll look straight ahead and answer no to each question. Okay.
Had me sit there, put the gizmo, put everything on me, and basically started to ask me questions.
While the test was underway, elsewhere in the sheriff's office, lead investigator Mark Ludwig was trying to get Shelley Carter to turn on her husband.
Mark Ludwig threatened me, and he told me that if I didn't get on the bus, that he was going to make sure I was under the bus. And I started to say to myself, something's terribly wrong here.
Shelley was confident her husband would pass the lie detector test and everyone could go home.
Regarding the death of your mom, do you intend to answer each question truthfully?
Yes.
Did you physically hurt your mom?
No.
Okay. Now this is important. When I say physically hurt your mom, okay, I want you to know exactly what I mean is, did you cause her death? Okay. Do you know for a fact who hurt your mom?
No.
Okay. Once again, I don't want to know if you have an opinion or I think this guy. Take the question what it means. Do you know for a fact who hurt your mom? No. Okay.
Right after the test was over, he left the room for maybe less than 5 minutes. He came back in and he said,
The month of July is a pivotal one for Iowa farmers. All eyes on the weather.
Producers obviously watching the weather
and on corn and soybean prices.
So USDA upping its corn price forecast by a dime to an average $3.60, which would be 4 cents higher.
But at the Carter farm in Lacona, Iowa, as they mourned the death of Shirley Carter, the anxiety was over the growing suspicion by the family about Jason Carter's role in her murder.
You gotta remember, he's still my son, and he was my favorite son. I always thought he'd farm with me someday.
Jason Carter was at the sheriff's office, about to learn how he did on the lie detector test.
We score them in 3 different ways. Okay, you can show non-deception, which means that we don't see any variation. Inconclusive, which means we're not sure. Or deception, which means we haven't heard the whole story yet. And you were deceptive.
The lie detector test was a crock of shit. That lie detector test was 110% wrong. So, I don't know. They sure tried their damnedest to get me to fess up to something I didn't do.
And State Police Agent Mark Ludwig used the results to bear down on Jason Carter.
Jason, what are the two things that you were deceptive on? Do you positively know who did this?
No!
Well, according to the test, you do.
Lucas, that damn thing is wrong!
It's not.
It is too!
It's not.
I never touched my mom! I never hurt her! The killer is still out there that shot her!
So back to the beginning.
What happened at your mom's house?
She was shot dead!
I understand that, Jason. We need to get to the truth here.
That is the truth! I walked in the door and my mom was laying in a pool of blood!
But Agent Ludwig says he knew that was not true.
The way he described the body on the floor still bleeding gave me great concern when I arrived on scene. I looked in the window as there's not blood everywhere. There's very minimal blood on the crime scene.
Okay? I walked in and found my mom dead, and that's it, period. That is the truth. That is too the truth.
We need to get past that, and we need to get to what the truth is.
I'm telling you the truth, the God awful truth. I'm telling you the truth.
Not telling you the truth, Jason.
Yes, I am.
Jason Carter was getting increasingly frustrated and angry with Mark Ludwig.
That guy is, in my opinion, pretty much the devil. I don't know how else to say it.
You're the one failing the polygraph examination. Nobody else fits those things. Jason, I'm confident. I agree with Mom. She doesn't deserve this.
She doesn't deserve it. If she could talk right now, she'd strike both your asses dead because she knows I didn't do that. Okay?
She does.
She would strike both your asses dead because I didn't do this. And if you keep blaming me, I guarantee both of you will go to hell because I didn't do the damn thing to my mom.
Well, Jason, I'm going to keep telling you did it because you did it.
No, I didn't.
And together we can get past this. But you condemning me to hell isn't going to change the facts of what occurred.
One of the facts was how the Carter house appeared to have been ransacked, something Jason Carter pointed out to his father right away that morning.
And he said, Dad, look, somebody's robbed you. And when I went into my office, all my drawers had been pulled out and dumped, just dumped. They hadn't went through anything. They were just dumped. And then he said, let's go in the bedroom. And her drawer, where she keeps her bras and her panties, was open. And nothing was taken. Her purse was hanging on our granddaughter's high chair. And she had $140 cash in it, and she had credit cards in there. And none of it had been touched. So it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense.
It made sense to Agent Ludwig.
The crime scene is that of a adolescent mindset. I need to stage this robbery. I need to make this look like a robbery. And at that point, no one knew the bedroom was ransacked other than Jason Carter. So how was he privy to that information when nobody else was?
Another question. How was Jason Carter able so quickly to discover a bullet hole in the floor and another one in the refrigerator?
You know what? I've done this a very long time. And you're right. People do react with disbelief and stuff when they find a body like that. You know what they don't do? They don't survey a crime scene and start telling me where bullet holes are at, Jason. That's what they don't do.
The gun used to kill Shirley Carter was never found, but Jason early on suggested it was a hunting rifle found missing from his father's gun safe in the basement.
What do you think was used to shoot your gun?
I think that .270 rifle was used to shoot my mom.
It was a Remington bolt-action .270 like this one.
Where'd it go? I don't know.
I think you know that's the murder weapon because you know what happened.
No, I don't.
Clearly, I believe Jason Carter knows exactly where that gun was on that crime scene. He placed that gun somewhere. I don't know where he put it.
Agent Ludwig and a second agent went around and around with Jason Carter into the evening.
These two guys were in my face a foot away, just ripping into me, saying, you know, you did this, you know you did this.
This doesn't matter. My mom is gone, and you can't
tell the truth.
Bullshit.
You're right. Your mom is gone.
She is gone because someone shot her.
Yes, you did, Jason. And
no, I
step
didn't.
up and take responsibility for your actions.
What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you people? I would never harm a hair on my mom's head.
It was only after Jason's wife Shelley demanded to talk to him on the phone that the agents gave up on their efforts to break him, to get a confession.
She demanded that she was either coming in or I was coming out.
She said she wants to go talk to you. You need to get out now.
That's fine. Like I told you from the very beginning, you're more than welcome at any time.
I'll go. But I don't have anything to hide, Mom. I told him there's no way I hurt my mom.
So that's when I got up and I walked out.
I never had my doubts about Jason's involvement with his mom. Now, did I have doubts about our marriage? Oh, you're not kidding. I mean, just what a disappointment. But I could have been a scorned wife because that's what Mark Ludwig wanted me to be. But I was raised that you do things because you know they're right. And I knew that he didn't have anything to do with his mom's death. So it wouldn't be right for me to be a scorned wife and say, you cheated on me. Now you can pay for your mom's death. That wouldn't be right. It didn't have anything to do with it.
She was ready to go to war for the man who had cheated on her. And she would have to.
The first thing that just stood out about this case was the unimaginable tragedy of a man losing his wife of 52 years and coming slowly to the conclusion in the days after the homicide that his son was the killer.
Well, I wanted some kind of justice for my wife. Some kind of justice. I didn't want her dying and no justice whatsoever.
You go out there with your family, chat.
But his son Jason Carter had walked out of the sheriff's office with no criminal charges filed, even after he failed the lie detector test.
The police didn't do a good job.
So Bill Carter hired his own private detective to investigate and re-examine the evidence in the case.
The thing that took Bill down the path of believing that Jason was the killer was the evidence.
Starting with what Jason had said about the gun safe in the basement, where one rifle, a likely murder weapon, had gone missing.
And they said, we don't know anything about a gun safe. We don't know anything at all about a gun safe.
I didn't even know he had a damn gun safe till just recently.
Well, I knew that was a lie because I knew they had gotten it for me for Christmas.
A photograph would later be found of Jason and his then toddler son assembling the gun safe for him on Christmas morning.
He and his wife both lied constantly, and that made it easier for me to tell the truth about what happened.
And more troubling to him, Bill Carter wondered how his son seemed to know right away that morning that Shirley Carter had been shot twice.
There was no way you would know that unless you did it. And then I knew that he did it. I knew he did it. Or hired it done, one or the other.
And both Bill Carter and Agent Mark Ludwig agreed on the motive for the murder, the affair Jason was having.
I believe he needed to stop his mom from telling his dad that he's having an affair.
I had no time for that. And he knew it too. I think he meant to kill both of us. I do. I think he was going to club me with something and then put a gun in my mouth.
All this time, Jason was back on his farm, tending to his fields, well aware that his father was turning on him.
He looked at me, and I've seen that look, I don't know, I couldn't tell you how many other times of when he's just sure about something. And he said, he looked at me, and he said, you know, I've got it figured out.
It had been more than a year, a full season of planting and harvest, when Bill Carter gave up on the criminal investigation and decided to take his son to court.
Bill decided to take matters into his own hands, and so he filed the lawsuit.
A civil action against his son Jason, blaming him for Shirley Carter's wrongful death, the subject of the last conversation father and son ever had.
And then he said, what are you going to do today, Dad? And I said, I'm going up to see my lawyer. And he hit the counter, the kitchen counter, hard, and he said, my life is over. My life is over.
For 5 days in the Marion, Iowa County Courthouse, a civil trial that pitted father against son over the murder of the mother, a family tragedy.
Jesus, you know, what father does this to their child? What father does this?
The case received national attention.
Say a son killed his mother because he was going bust.
She was just laying there, looking off like, and I knelt down. And I grabbed her pant leg and shook it and said, Mom, you know, hoping she'd respond.
Did you scream?
No.
Were you crying?
You know, I think I don't know, it was just shock.
In reality, killers come in all shapes and sizes. What I'll tell you is that Jason came across to us in the civil trial as, number one, highly insincere, and number two, very shifty.
Jason Carter's lawyers were convinced it was a ploy to spur a criminal charge against Jason.
We know that the prosecutor was sitting in the civil trial the entire time, taking notes. So in our opinion, law enforcement, the state of Iowa, and Bill Carter worked hand in hand.
A civil trial has a lower standard of proof than a criminal trial, but still it was no slam dunk.
Convincing a jury that a son is going to kill his mother in the kitchen of the farmhouse where that son was raised just sounds like quite a mountain to climb.
But the jury took only 2 hours to reach a verdict.
I guess I had a bad gut feeling, and, you know, my gut feeling was spot on.
Jason Carter, guilty, liable, ordered to pay $10 million.
When they came back with that $10 million judgment, I kind of figured everything was going to go to hell.
And it did. The prosecution now decided it had enough evidence to charge Jason Carter with murder. His nemesis, Agent Mark Ludwig, made sure he was the one to put Carter in handcuffs in front of Carter's teenage son.
And he said, I've been waiting 2.5 years to do this. He said, do you have anything to say, you pussy?
Now, much more was at stake than a $10 million judgment. Jason Carter, if found guilty, would be sentenced to prison for the rest of his life with no chance of parole.
Albany Statements this afternoon. Is an Iowa son a seed of evil? It's a case of murder on the farm.
But even before the trial began, behind the scenes, Jason Carter had to consider a possible plea deal.
Jason had to make some very difficult decisions.
5 years or so in prison instead of a possible life sentence with no parole. A tempting deal.
Boy, you know, a person's pretty leery after going through a civil suit and then taking 2 hours to come up with a guilty. You just hate to put your hands into the jury again.
But his wife Shelley put her foot down.
No way in hell. Because Jason already spent 5 days in jail. And I said to him, you're not going to spend another day, not one more day, in jail or prison for something you didn't do. Your mom wouldn't be okay with it. I'm not okay with it. You're coming home to us.
So the trial began.
On behalf of the state, you may read the charge and make your opening statement.
Ed Bull, the county attorney, began by describing Jason Carter as a man who acted out of greed, who may have actually planned to kill both his parents to get his hands on their farm, valued at $6 million.
They weren't ready to retire and let Jason Carter have Carter Farms. So you might be wondering, if Jason Carter couldn't run Carter Farms instead of his parents, why didn't he just run Carter Farms with his parents? Jason Carter, the man sitting in that chair right there, said he could never go into business with that bitch.
For Jason Carter's lawyer, Christine Branston, it was essential for her to paint a different picture of the relationship between Jason and his mother.
Jason Carter was a son who loved his mother, spent a lot of time with her.
Essential to the defense to get ahead of what they knew was testimony coming about the mother-son relationship.
The state calls Brandon Smith, Your Honor.
A local farm equipment salesman, Brandon Smith, who knew the family and Jason well.
I asked why he didn't farm together with his dad, and his response was, I can't because my mom is a bitch.
Did it surprise you when he said that?
A little, yes.
Why?
I have known Shirley about as long as Bill, and it was just, she didn't strike me as that person. I guess I just didn't realize that was how he felt, I guess. Kind of took me back a little.
The defense was braced for the prosecution's strongest witness.
State of Iowa calls Bill Carter. If I can get you to raise your right hand for me, please. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Please be seated.
The testimony of Jason's father, Bill Carter.
That was my biggest concern going into the trial, is that a jury would think, well, if the father thinks he did it, he must have done it.
The prosecutor began with questions to back up the alleged motive, money.
Did you start to have concerns that Jason was going to struggle to pay off his farming debts?
Yes, I did.
Jason, at the time of the murder, was deeply in debt. Bill was interested in farming with Jason to try to help him out. Shirley was dead set against it and did not want Bill and Jason to be farming together. And so Shirley was really the person standing in the way of the solution to Jason's financial problems.
How much was he going to come up short?
I assume somewhere between 100 and 150,000.
Bill Carter knew his testimony could put his son in prison for life.
Yeah, it bothered me. That's just because I loved him. You can't stop loving somebody. He did something terrible, but you can't stop loving somebody.
And the emotion was raw as the questioning turned to the moment Bill Carter found the body of his wife of 52 years.
What did you see?
I found Shirley on the floor. And she just looked like she was sleeping. Her eyes were closed. Her hands were crossed. And her legs were crossed. And I picked her head up. And I held her.
For the defense, no piece of evidence was more important than this surveillance video showing Jason Carter at the cargo grain silo between 9 and 10 in the morning, an hour's drive away from his parents' home.
Meaning that Jason Carter could not have been at the home at the time that Shirley Carter was killed.
And the defense would hammer that point home with their medical expert who testified about how long Shirley Carter had been dead when her body was found.
My opinion I would express would be around 2 hours.
The time of death was absolutely crucial, and I believe all medical evidence points towards the time of death at the point when Jason Carter would have been at Cargill.
Get you to raise your right hand for me, please. Do you swear to tell the truth?
But the key witness for the defense, not for the prosecution strangely enough, was the state police lead investigator who had focused on Jason.
My name is Mark Ludwig.
I have never been involved in a case or seen a case of any significance where the state did not call the lead investigator.
What the defense wanted to show was a failure by Ludwig and others to follow up on tips from local residents that 3 area men with long criminal records had killed Shirley Carter during a botched robbery.
At least a dozen of those people say that it was a burglary gone wrong, correct?
I'm not sure how many people, but yeah, burglary gone wrong was something that we knew by noon on the day of the homicide was going around the small community.
But again,
not to my knowledge.
And again,
I don't remember.
And again,
I don't know.
The agent was stymied by the questions.
I'm definitely confused at this point.
Or could not remember.
But I've done a lot of stupid stuff in my career and during interviews, and so I hope I wouldn't have done that.
What we were able to show is that they weren't fully investigated, and the door was open that they or anyone else could have been guilty.
None of the 3 men was ever charged in connection with the murder. Prosecutor Ed Bull sought to set the record straight.
Were there any alternative suspects that came to light?
Not from anyone other than Jason Carter.
Sir, has there been anyone during the investigation of the death of Shirley Carter that provided information that was consistent with what you found at the crime scene?
Yes.
Who was that person?
Jason Carter.
Jason Carter ever shed a tear?
Not once, never, until this courtroom.
So now the stage was set for Jason Carter to take the stand and once again attest to his innocence. The day began with a surprise move by Jason Carter's lawyers.
And Your Honor, the defense rests.
Very well.
Meaning Jason Carter was not going to testify in his own defense.
We had never really considered the idea of not putting Jason on the stand until the very end of the trials.
His lawyers thought they had a winning hand and did not want to let prosecutor Ed Bull have a go at Jason.
Lawyers are tricky, and the prosecutor is an excellent lawyer. And there's a good chance that he could have, made Jason say something, or that Jason would have gotten confused by the questioning.
Ladies and gentlemen, that means the evidence is done. As the saying goes, it's all over but the shouting.
So it was straight to the closing arguments.
There's no dispute someone committed murder in the first degree. The question is, who is that somebody?
But the prosecutor knew there was no physical evidence from the crime scene to connect Jason Carter. No fingerprints, no weapon. And the jury was not told about Carter failing the lie detector test.
What else? That damn thing is wrong.
Nor would the judge let the prosecutor reveal some other key facts about Jason.
The jury didn't hear about the affair. The jury had a much more limited understanding of Jason's financial circumstances and the family strife that caused. And so the jury had a much weaker understanding of why Jason would have done this.
It was a circumstantial evidence case based largely on surmise.
How does Jason Carter know his parents' bedroom is ransacked for any other reason than Jason Carter's the one who did it?
And the prosecutor scoffed at the defense position that law enforcement failed to investigate other possible suspects, calling it a distraction.
The only reason that story, these alternative suspects, make sense is because it's an attempted burglary. Well, who caused the attempted burglary? Jason Carter, by staging.
And finally, to Jason's relationship with his mother.
There was friction. We got told we were going to hear this story about this loving family with no conflict. But what you heard was just the opposite from Mr. Carter, Bill, and from Brandon Smith.
My mom is a bitch.
There's only two people in this world who know what happened, and one of them is dead, and the other one's sitting behind me. Based on the evidence, and in support of that evidence, the state of Iowa requests that you find Jason Carter guilty of murder in the first degree.
I believe we are ready for closing statement on behalf of the defendant, Ms. Branstad.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, this was a case built against Jason Carter instead of a case trying to solve a crime and look at all the clues. And let's look at all the other leads that weren't followed. There were so many statements made about three individuals who don't have an alibi.
And then the defense's other main point, the video showing Jason Carter at the Cargill grain elevator, pulling away in his semi-truck just before 10 in the morning, about an hour's drive away from his parents' home.
Rest assured, the state has not had anyone who testified they believe Shirley Carter died after 10:30 at 1. There's no one who says they believe that time of death was later. But any one of those means Jason Carter could not have been there. And at the end of this case, there's so many holes in this investigation. There's so much that isn't even explored. And in reality, the forensic evidence not only says that there's reasonable doubt, the forensic evidence says Jason Carter couldn't possibly be guilty. Shirley Carter died long before that, probably while he was at Cargill on video. I ask you to return the verdict of not guilty. As the jury went on to deliberate, our main hope was that they would look at the evidence and the lack of evidence, and that they wouldn't be distracted by a family that had turned against Jason.
As the jury was deliberating his fate, Jason Carter was nervous, preparing for prison.
You know, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't.
He sent text messages to his teenage son Chase and 5-year-old daughter McKenna.
Just in case. I said, Daddy loves you very much. And that I would, I'll be home to see you soon. That was real hard. But I felt like I needed to do that because you never know what a jury's thinking.
He found out just 2 hours later.
You may be seated, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, have you reached the verdict?
And so I prepared Jason for the worst possible verdict and made some requests that he not overreact if he got a negative verdict.
Form of verdict number 1.
He was shaking, gray, no color in his skin at all.
We, the jury, find Jason Carter not guilty. Is that your verdict, ladies and gentlemen? Mr. Bull, do you care to have the jury polled? No, sir. Very well.
Started to cry visibly, and I think it was just the release of the pressure and the tension and what he had gone through.
And then kisses from the wife who had stood by him through it all.
Of acquittal, any bond previously posted by the defendant will be released and exonerated. Anything further on behalf of the defendant at this point, Ms. Branstad? On behalf of the state?
His father, Bill, was devastated.
They took me out of the courtroom as fast as they could get me out of there. The DA took me downstairs where I cried. I knew it was over with.
After the verdict, prosecutor Ed Bull said he remained certain Jason Carter was the killer.
I wouldn't have signed my name to the trial information and brought this case if I did not believe Jason Carter is responsible. We want to be certain we have the right guy, and we were certain we did. The jury saw it differently.
And I loved my wife. I loved her dearly. And I was afraid what would happen is exactly what happened. I was afraid there would be no verdict. And now she's what you call a cold case. She's a cold case.
The anger and the bitterness and the legal drama with the Carter family is still far from over. Jason and Shelley are suing his father, the state of Iowa, and Agent Mark Levin, who declined to comment.
We want a new set of eyes on this case in the worst way. We want an investigator who is going to investigate. We're over 5 years now, and we're still fighting. And you know what? I tell you what, we're not about to stop.